Hello and welcome back. In this video, I'm going to show you how to enter this example circuit into Xilinx. In the previous video, I showed you how to actually create a new project. So I'm assuming that you've already done that. The first thing I'm going to show you is how to enter this example circuit as a schematic. So to do that, I go to Project, New Source, and my new source wizard, I select schematic as my source type and then give it a file name. So I'm going to call this task1. Remember that the file name has to be different from your project name, and you have to make sure that it starts with a letter and contains only alphanumeric characters. Now click on Next and then Finish. Once you do that, Xilinx creates schematic, adds it to your project, and opens it up for editing. Now, if your design is too big and you want to increase the size of the schematic, just double-click on an empty space. And by this drop-down menu, you can basically select the size of the sheet that you want. I'm going to leave it at C. Now, let's go back to the example circuit. So in this example circuit, you can see that I need two AND gates, one OR gate, and one inverter gate. So in Project Navigator, I'm basically going to select my symbols panel, and I can either browse down or scroll down and then select my symbols, or I can use my symbol name filter down at the bottom and then select my symbols. So the first thing I'm going to do is select my AND gate symbol and then place two of these symbols on my schematic. Then I do the same for the OR gate, and I just need one of them, and do the same thing for the inverter gate. So now, if I want to get out of the add symbol mode, I basically click escape on my keyboard and I can select get out of the add symbol mode. I can change the orientation of the symbol by just selecting the symbol and then selecting the rotate or the mirror tool to actually change the orientation. So now I want to wire this up. So to wire it up, I basically select my add wire tool. Now in this mode, when I bring the cursor to the point to near a pin or a component pin, you would see that my cursor gets transformed to 4 boxes. To show this clearly, I'm just zooming in right now, and you can see the 4 boxes there. If I click at that point, then one of the wires is going to get connected to that component pin. And I can drag and then click at the other point that I want to connect the wire to. So I'm going to wire up the other things. Should be done here in a minute. And if I want to arbitrarily end a point, then I can just double click and that will arbitrarily end a point. So again, arbitrarily ending a point, I just double click and that would arbitrarily end a point. Okay, so I've made a mistake here. I've intended to actually connect that to the other wire, not to this wire. So what I do is I select the line segment, but you see that all the line segments are getting selected. But I just want one particular line segment. So in my options panel, I select just the line segment, and then on the keyboard, if I click delete, I'll delete it. So I'm going to wire this up properly now, and my circuit now is almost done. The only thing that's left for me to do right now is to add terminals to these pins right here. So to do that, I select the Add I/O Marker tool. Again, I bring the cursor close to the point where I want to connect, and then click, and that would put a marker. You'll see that my input markers are automatically assigned, my output markers are also automatically assigned. So now I want to rename the markers as ABC for my inputs. So I right click here and select rename port and call that A. I click here again. I just rename this as B. I'm going to click cancel because I just realized that if I look at my original circuit or look at my example circuit, my first one is going to be called B and the second one is going to be called A. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rename this one as B. So rename that as B and rename the other one as A. Oops, I wanted to rename that as A. There we go. Rename this terminal as C. And then finally rename the output terminal as F. Okay, so now my schematic is done. So basically what I want to do is I want to save the schematic. So if I go up here, click on the save icon, then I can save the schematic. Now I want to check the schematic for errors. So I click on the check schematic tool, and then down at the bottom in the console panel, I should see no errors or warning detected. So now my schematic is actually done. Now in the lab, most of your designs are going to be done by schematic. But there are some labs where the design is actually too big, such that entering that into a schematic is actually a very tedious task. Now for those cases, I'm going to show you how to enter the design in Vhdl. So again, I go to Project, New Source, and this time instead of selecting schematic, I'm going to select Vhdl module and give that a file name. Again, the file name has to be different from the other file and project names. And make sure that it starts with a letter and contains only alphanumeric characters. Click on Next. In this window, I'm going to select what my output and input ports are. So my input ports are ABC. So I'm going to type in ABC. And my output port is F. So change that to output and click on Next. Make sure that I've actually written all input and output ports and then click on Finish. As you can see, a Vhdl template is actually created for me. Now in this template, you'll see that my keywords are in blue, my comments are in green, and my values are in black. Okay, so to enter the design, I basically have to go back to my example circuit and figure out what my equation is going to be. Now the output of this gate is A and B. And the output of the inverter gate is going to be A prime. And the output of the AND gate immediately following that would be A prime C. So the final output is going to be AB plus A prime C. So in Vhdl, the way I enter this is going to be A and B or not A and C. So the place where I enter this would be right after the keyword begin in the architecture section. So in here, I'm going to enter F less than equal to A and B or not A and C. And I'm going to end that line with a semicolon. Now you can see here I have parentheses at A and B. That is to make sure that that gets computed first before the second term gets computed and the two terms are then computed. So now my Vhdl file is done, so I just click on Save. Now I want to check the syntax, just like how I did for the schematic. So to do that, what I do is in my hierarchy pane or my hierarchy panel, I select my Vhdl file, which is task2. And then down in the process panel, I directly see check syntax. I'm going to double click on that. And when the green check mark shows, I know that there's no syntax errors in here. Now, you can see that there's a icon right here beside my schematic file. Now, let me just show you if that icon is actually in my Vhdl file. So like that, now you will see that I don't see my check syntax directly. I'll have to expand implement design, I'll have to expand synthesize, and only then do I actually see my check syntax. Okay, so now that my design files are done, this video is almost complete. And all I have to do is basically run the simulation.